Hi, everyone. This is Jim Pikarski. I teach meditation and give Dharma talks at Venice Mindfulness Center, Blue Lotus Meditation Center in Venice, Florida. Um, Today, I'd like to talk about a topic that everyone can benefit from, and this is dealing with difficult moods and emotions. Um, as we practice and we become more mindful, more attentive to ourselves, what can happen is that we can use this to be able to change our outlook and change our negative emotions into something more positive. So mindfulness is like a microscope. We can look at these emotions as they arise and eventually understand them completely. We also, as we practice meditation, what happens is we cultivate equanimity. Equanimity means that we can look at some of these emotions without getting disturbed. So we want to catch them as they're arising. We need to see them directly and not get totally lost in them. One of the problems with emotions is that once they arise in us, we get totally lost in them. And once we get totally lost in them, we lose perspective completely. Excuse me. Once we lose perspective, then what happens is that we can say things to others, do things to others, say things to ourselves, or even do things to ourselves that are harmful and destructive. In Buddhism, there are 6 senses: seeing, hearing, tasting, and smelling, but the last 2 are in the arena of emotion. And one is mental perception, which is the thoughts and images that go through your mind. And the other is the feeling and bodily sensations that you feel within your body. Emotions are really the interplay of these 2 things. And so they really influence each other. Our mind influences our senses, and our senses and body can influence our mind. So we have this interplay between mind and body sensation. Also, a couple other things that come into this are instincts. We have a basic instinct of fight, flight, or freeze. When this instinct is triggered, that can really disrupt our emotions also, like fear or anger, things like that. We also can be influenced by general slight mood changes due to health, or biorhythms, changes in our environment. Astrology, whatever you may feel, is responsible for the ups and downs that we normally feel in our lives. So instincts are, we all have instincts, and basically the instinctual system is pretty much the same. It responds to real stimuli. So if you're out in the woods and all of a sudden a wild animal approaches you, like a bear or something, you're going to have a fight or flight reaction. Now, the thing about the fight or flight reaction is that it can also be triggered by our own mind. So you could be dreaming that a bear is there. And if you're dreaming that a bear is there, you may wake up very fearful, or you'll find yourself running or fighting the bear. And it's just a dream. It's totally mental. But even though it's totally mental, our fight or flight reaction, our instincts take over and really affect us strongly. When we think of something, we tend to feel good. When we think of something good, this is different than feeling good because of a massage. When you feel good because of a massage, you just feel good because you don't have to think about it. It's just happening, a direct response to a comforting touch. But we can also respond to our thoughts. When we think of something bad, we also feel bad. This is different than just physical pain. With physical pain, we just feel it. Thought is not necessary. If I hit my finger with a hammer, it's going to hurt. And that hurt is not mediated by thought. It's going to hurt whether I think about it or not. It doesn't matter. So hitting myself with a hammer is direct sensation. Whereas thinking about something bad and then responding to it is more of a psychological emotion. So our body reacts to everything that we think, positively, negatively, or neutrally. It also responds to our environment and responds to things that happen. And one of the essential discriminations is to be able to understand when your body and when your emotions are responding to something that's just purely in your mind and something that is actual, something that is happening in the environment. So this distinction becomes incredibly important because it really gives us the information to tell us how to manage our emotions. So most negative emotions, I would say 95% of them, are due to distorted and negative thinking. In most cases, most people, their lives are mostly peaceful. Now, if you're going through a war or something like that, then it's not due to your thinking, it's due to the actual environment. But typically our environments are okay. So let's take an example of this distinction. You make a mistake, and instead of just noting it and trying again, and you regret the mistake, there's a feeling there. Oh, I would not like to make that. I would like to do something better. I don't really want to make that mistake. There's a feeling, but rather than just noting the feeling, noting the mistake, and trying again, you say to yourself, "I just can't do anything right." In other words, now you're generating a bad feeling. So we're creating a psychological feeling. In a sense, it's unnecessary. So most positive emotions are natural. Few are due to positive thinking. We can make ourselves, feel positive by thinking something positive. We can anticipate something that's going to happen, and we can say, "Oh, it's going to be great. It's going to be great." But mostly, we just feel good when we're not disturbing ourselves. If you're not disturbing yourselves with thinking, then our basic nature is basically peaceful. And the problem is that we disturb ourselves all the time with our thinking and our negative and distorted thinking. So, for instance, if you're a meditator and you meditate, what you'll find as you settle into your true nature, you just settle down, your mind settles down. What happens is you find that there's just peace there. One of the peace is always there. It's just that the mind is normally thinking and is interfering with that peace. Negative moods are more long-term. They're not due to a few thoughts, but due to deeply held beliefs and thoughts they generate over and over again. For instance, you believe that life sucks. You believe that life sucks, then you look for evidence of this, basically. I can't believe this happened to me. Why do I always end up in the longest line in the grocery store? In other words, you're looking for things to complain about. And because you're looking for things to complain about, you're actually not looking really for things to complain about. You're looking for things that reinforce your belief that life sucks. So if you believe that life sucks, what happens is that after a while you can create a mood of being resentful, a mood of being depressed. Moods last much longer than emotions. In Buddhism, a basic premise is that we create our own unhappiness. We create our own unhappiness through our delusions. This means thinking and believing things that are untrue, negative, and distorted. So it is imperative that we begin to understand what we create and what just happens to us. We can't change what just happens to us, but we can change what we create. But we can't really even start with this until we really distinguish this. So most all negative emotions are triggered by thought. Not all negative emotions are distorted. Some are based on facts. Someone betrays you. If you're betrayed by somebody and you trust them, you lose someone, you receive a negative medical diagnosis, all these things are going to be painful. They're painful in the moment and they're based on fact. And we have to adjust to them. But all these things we can adjust to. And once we adjust to them, the negative emotion disappears. And this is the thing about negative emotion. If we're not making it worse by our own thinking, it tends to come and go pretty quickly. So even if we lose somebody close to us, the grieving period is for a few months or whatever, and then it heals. However, if we have distorted thinking, it can last for a long time. When I worked as a therapist, I would find people who were stuck in the grieving process. They would be stuck in the grieving process for one reason or another, but a very common reason would be guilt. They would say, I really should have talked to them before they died. We were in an argument. We hadn't talked to each other for a couple of years. And they have guilt about it. And because they have guilt about it, they can't let the grief go. The grief is almost a punishment for them. So on one hand, you have the actual grief. And then on the other hand, you have this elaboration of the grief, this elaboration of the negative feeling due to guilt. The one due to guilt is self-created. So through our own thinking, we can make natural emotions like grief, in this example, much worse, or we can create negative emotions out of whole cloth. We can just create a negative emotion for ourselves. You know, we misinterpret something to happen and say, oh, they don't like me or whatever. And all of a sudden, you feel distant and isolated, and it's not even based upon anything. You just misinterpreted the situation. So it's all based upon your own thinking. So let's talk about some basic steps for managing these feelings. So one thing we have to do is we really have to train ourselves in mindfulness and meditation so that we can notice and wake up when you have a negative emotion. So we have to notice when we're having a negative emotion. A lot of times our emotions just carry us away and we're lost in them. I remember in my 20s, I would get in these depressive episodes, like not seriously depressed, but just feeling bad for maybe weeks at a time. And then all of a sudden, I'd wake up and I go, what am I doing? Why am I thinking so negatively? And as soon as I did that, I would just pull myself out of the negative mood. But first, I had to wake up. Since then, I've trained myself to be very attentive. As soon as my mood turns negative, I look immediately at my thinking, so that I can see if my thinking has caused it or is it an actual situation in my environment. So once we identify that we're having a negative mood or a negative emotion, then the important thing is to stay with the feeling of the emotion. So if you stay with the feeling, then you can explore it. And what happens is that the feeling can come to the surface, because you can't really change anything unless you can really be aware of it. So we have to really bring our awareness to these things. A lot of people deny their emotions and push them aside. And because they push them aside, they can never change them. They can never manage them. They can never work with them because they don't even know what's happening inside of themselves. They just avoid them. A lot of people have all kinds of defenses to avoid their emotions, you know, distracting themselves, drinking, various other things. So the third step is ask yourself, how is my point of view, my deep beliefs and thoughts contributing to this negative emotion? So if you ask yourself that question, what happens is that you move from just accepting it or thinking everything is true to you start really examining how your point of view is supporting this negative emotion. If somebody just died, you realize, oh, it's just a fact. But if you have some story going on inside your own mind, that story may be creating a much, much more negative emotion than, or again, just purely out of whole cloth. So we have to ask ourselves, how is my point of view contributing to this? And this is the crux of it. But first you have to become aware of it, and you have to stay with the feeling so you can discover what it is. And then once you stay with the feeling, you ask yourself, how is my point of view, my deep beliefs and thoughts contributing to this negative emotion? Then once you look at that, then you ask yourself, is the story I'm telling myself about this absolutely factual? If it's absolutely factual, then you just wait until the feeling's done, because the emotion will move. Emotions are temporary when they're natural. They're not temporary, and they can be held for a long time if we're supporting them through distorted thinking. So if it's absolutely factual, somebody did betray you and it takes you a little time to get over it, then you just notice it, and then you're over it in a few days, and you don't think you're a horrible person. You don't think they're a horrible person. Those kinds of thoughts are irrelevant. You just need that time to get over it. So if the story you're telling yourself is distorted in any way or untrue, you're manufacturing your own negative emotions. So if you're telling yourself a story that's untrue, you really have to be aware of this, because you're creating suffering for yourself. And the suffering is unnecessary. And everyone really needs to learn this, because if you don't learn this, you will suffer much, much more than you need to. And a lot of us automatically create, sometimes people call it neurotic emotions. Why are they neurotic? Because they're based upon our distorted thinking. They're not based on reality. And neurotic emotions can last for a long time. They can keep coming back over and over again, and they can make our lives a misery. So we separate out what is factual and what isn't. Sometimes it's totally non-factual, sometimes it's totally factual, but sometimes they're a mix. So yes, my husband died. I feel sad and I need to grieve, which is natural. It is not true that now I will always be lonely, that life is not worth living, etc. Okay, so we're really separating out the negative commentary from just the facts. So I'm just going to go over these steps again. So train yourself to be mindful, to notice, to wake up when you're having a negative emotion so that you can examine it. Stay with the feeling so you can look into it. Ask yourself, how is my point of view, my deep feelings and belief contributing to this negative emotion? Ask yourself if the story you're telling yourself is factual about it, or if the story is distorted in any way or untrue. So in mixed cases, find out what is factual and separate it from what is not factual. You can work with the part that's non-factual, and you can change that. With the factual part, you can just accept it and just allow your emotions to change naturally, which they will over a period of time. If it's a great loss in your life, it may take months. So try this. Take an emotional problem, examine it, see what story supports it, what belief. Don't start with overwhelming things, but just start with some small things. And begin to practice this, because if you practice this, what happens is like anything else. If you practice it, you'll get good at it. And you may want to run this video again at some point. It's a fairly short video, but it's very important. So, what it'll do is you can become an expert in managing your own emotions. If you do that, you're going to be much happier. So I would encourage you to, consider working with this. So thank you.